On my 32nd birthday, I realized my parents had abandoned me without a single goodbye. There wasn't a big screaming fight, no slamming doors like in the movies. There was just silence. That morning, I waited for a text, a simple, "Happy birthday, kiddo," like they'd sent me for over 30 years. Nothing. I called my mom. The number was disconnected. I called my dad. Also disconnected. I even tried the old landline tied to my entire childhood. This number is no longer in service. At first, I thought it was some kind of technical issue, but then I found out they had changed their numbers, sent the new ones to the whole family, except me. And worse than that, in an old email, I read one single line that almost shattered my world. "We're so happy to have Sarah back in our lives." Who is Sarah? Why could my parents choose silence for the only child they raised, but open their hearts to someone who never existed in my version of our story? This is the story of the day I realized. It wasn't me who went no contact with my parents. My parents went no contact with me first. I found out my parents had gone no contact with me on my 32nd birthday. Not in a dramatic, movie-worthy way. There was no screaming phone call, no shattered plates, no storming out into the rain. There was just nothing. No call at breakfast. No text saying, "Happy birthday, kiddo," with too many exclamation marks. No e-card from my mom with glittery cupcakes and dancing cats. I told myself they were busy. It was a Friday, after all. Maybe Dad had an early shift at the hospital. Maybe Mom had her book club. Maybe their phones were dead. I told myself a lot of things that morning, because the alternative that they had simply chosen not to speak to me felt like walking onto a frozen lake and hearing it crack under my feet. By noon, a quiet panic had started to rise in my chest. I checked my phone so often it became a kind of nervous tick. I opened our family group chat, the Harris 3, and scrolled up, photos from Christmas. A video of Dad trying to put together an IKEA shelf and cursing under his breath. A selfie of Mom and me when I'd visited in March, her cheeks pressed against mine, both of us squinting into the sun. Last message in the chat. "We'll talk about this later, Em." Sent 3 weeks ago. I clicked on it, as if the text would suddenly expand and offer context I'd missed. It didn't. It just sat there, flat and stubborn. At 12:07 p.m., I called my mom. The call went straight to voicemail. "Hey, you've reached Lisa Harris. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon." Her recorded voice chirped, bright and familiar. I listened through the whole thing, then hung up without saying anything. At 12:10 p.m., I called my dad. 3 rings. Then voicemail. "This is Mark. You know what to do." My throat felt tight. I tried the house line, the old number that still lived in my muscle memory, my fingers dialing it before my brain caught up. It went to a generic robotic message. "This number is no longer in service." I stared at my phone. That had to be a mistake. My parents had had that number for 24 years. The thought of it just disappearing felt like finding their house missing from the street. I opened my email, searching Mom, then Dad, then Harris. Nothing new. I checked spam, just in case some overzealous filter had decided my parents were promotional content. Nothing. It was my birthday. They knew it was my birthday. My mother had written the date on every calendar she'd ever owned. She'd told me, more than once, that the day I was born was the day she truly understood what love meant. But the only people who had messaged so far were my friends, my coworkers, and my girlfriend, Lena, who'd sent me a voice note at 7 a.m., singing a painfully off-key version of Happy Birthday that had made me laugh into my pillow. By 2 p.m., the dread had pulled up a chair and settled in. I tried Mom again. This time, the call didn't even go to voicemail. A flat, cold message filled my ear. "The number you have dialed has been changed, disconnected, or is no longer in service." My parents hadn't just ignored me. They had changed their numbers. Something inside me lurched. I opened our group chat again and tapped on Dad's contact. Under his name, where there used to be a phone number, there was now a grayed-out line, no contact information. In the top corner, the option to message was gone, replaced with invite to iMessage. I checked my mom's contact. Same thing. I backed out of the chat and tried to send a new text to my dad, manually tapping in the old number. The message bubble stayed stubbornly green, then failed with a little red exclamation mark. I felt suddenly lightheaded, like the air in my apartment had thinned. "Hey," Lena's voice sounded from the kitchen. "You okay in there? Coffee's ready." I swallowed, locked my phone screen, and forced my voice into something resembling normal. "Yeah," I called back, "just checking something for work." It was easier, right then, to lie to my girlfriend than to say out loud what my brain was beginning to whisper. I think my parents have cut me off. Of course, it didn't come out of nowhere. Looking back, the signs had been there for months, maybe years, like hairline cracks in a wall you stop noticing because you've lived with them too long. The last time I'd been home was in early March. My parents lived in a mid-sized Pennsylvania town that had exactly two claims to fame: a minor league baseball team and a bakery that had been on a Food Network show once. I'd grown up there, gone to college 2 states away, and eventually ended up in Philadelphia as a social worker. My parents still lived in the same 2-story house, with a small maple tree out front that my dad swore he'd planted the day I was born. "See that tree, Em?" he'd say every time we pulled into the driveway when I was a kid. "It grows when you grow." As a child, I'd believed him, because the tree always seemed a little taller each summer. In March, though, the maple looked tired, sparse, like it hadn't had enough water or sunlight. I'd stared at it out the car window and felt an odd, tight pang in my chest. Mom had hugged me on the porch, scented with lavender and laundry detergent, and made a big show of patting my cheeks. "You're too thin," she declared immediately. "Are you eating enough? You look tired. Mark, doesn't she look tired?" Dad had given me a quick, one-armed hug. "She works too much," he said, which was his way of saying he was proud without admitting he was proud. We'd gone inside and fallen back into our usual script. Mom fussed over dinner, Dad flipped between channels, grumbling about the news, and I tried to be the version of myself they were most comfortable with: polite, agreeable, careful. I didn't mention therapy. I didn't mention that Lena and I had moved in together. I didn't mention that some days my job left me so emotionally wrung out that I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving home, just to cry. Instead, I let Mom show me her new air fryer and listened to Dad complain about kids these days and how no one wanted to work. I slept in my childhood bedroom, in a bed that felt too small and too soft, surrounded by trophies from a swim team I'd stopped caring about in high school. The second night, over pot roast, it happened. "So," Mom said, in that deceptively light tone she used when she'd been rehearsing a question, "have you thought any more about what we talked about at Christmas?" I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. "Remind me?" "You know," she said, waving her hand, "about moving back here. There's a position at the county office. You could have a normal schedule. Not all those dangerous situations." Dad chimed in. "Your mother worries about you, going into strangers' homes in the city. Half the time you're in neighborhoods the news is always talking about." "It's my job," I said, "and it's not like that. We take precautions." "That's not the point," Mom said quickly. "We're not getting any younger. We thought, well, we hoped that maybe you'd want to be closer, help out more. You know how my back has been, and your dad's knee." There it was, the thing that had been hovering unsaid since I'd arrived. "You want me to move back?" I said slowly, "so I can take care of you." Mom looked offended. "That's not fair. We're your parents. Families take care of each other." "I'm not saying I won't help," I replied carefully. But my life is in Philadelphia. My work, my friends. Your girlfriend, Dad added, the word landing heavy. I met his eyes. Yes, my girlfriend. He exhaled through his nose, a little puff of disapproval. You've known her what? A year? 18 months, I said. And I love her. Mom made a tiny clicking sound with her tongue. Love, she repeated, like it was a risky new drug. Emma, honey, you say that every time you meet someone new. Remember Ben and Jason? And this is different, I cut in. My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. And this is not about Lena. This is about you wanting me to put my life on hold. Dad's jaw tightened. We're asking you to be a good daughter. The word good hit me like a slap. It carried years of unspoken rules. Don't rock the boat. Don't make us uncomfortable. Don't choose yourself. My therapist's voice floated up in my mind. You're allowed to have a life that isn't organized entirely around other people's needs, Emma. I put my fork down. I have been a good daughter, I said quietly. I visit. I call. I send money when you need it. I do everything you ask, and then some. But I'm not going to move back here just because you're afraid of getting older. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Mom's eyes filled with tears so fast, it was like flipping a switch. Afraid of getting older, she repeated, wounded. Listen to how she talks about us, Mark. Dad's gaze hardened. You know, not everything's about your feelings, Em. We did everything for you. We worked overtime, took on extra shifts, helped you with college, and now, when we ask for something, you're not asking, I said. You're demanding. He slammed his hand down on the table, making the cutlery jump. We're your parents. I know, I replied. I'm your daughter, not your retirement plan. Mom pushed her chair back so abruptly it screeched against the floor. I've lost my appetite, she said. You two can finish. She left the room, her shoulders stiff. Dad stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working. We'll talk about this later, Em, he said finally, in a tone that made it sound less like an invitation and more like a warning. That night, I lay awake in my old bed, staring at the glow in the dark stars still stuck to the ceiling from when I was 12. Down the hall, my parents' voices rose and fell in low, urgent waves. I couldn't make out the words, but I could guess the script. She's changed. Therapy's put ideas in her head. She thinks we're the bad guys now. In the morning, Mom was cool but polite. Dad was quieter than usual. When they hugged me goodbye on Sunday, Mom's arms felt loose around me, like she was already letting go. We'll talk later, Dad repeated, his hand heavy on my shoulder. 3 weeks later, he texted those same words in the family chat. And then, on my birthday, there was nothing at all. By the time Lena got home from the bakery with a small chocolate cake and a ridiculous sparkly 32 candle, I'd worked myself into a strange, numb state. We ate the cake at our tiny kitchen table, surrounded by the clutter of our real life. A stack of unopened mail, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on a side table, a plant we kept forgetting to water. Lena talked about a customer who'd tried to pay with Canadian coins and then argued about it, mimicking his accent in a way that made me snort laugh for a second. You've been quiet all day, she said eventually, spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. Birthday blues? I could have lied again. I almost did. Instead, I heard myself say, I think my parents changed their numbers without telling me. She blinked. What? I pushed my phone across the table. Call my mom's number. She frowned but dialed. When the same robotic message came on, this number has been changed. Disconnected. Her eyes widened. Maybe they got a new plan? She suggested weakly. Did they say anything about that? No. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else, and their contacts disappeared from my iMessage. It's like they deleted me, or blocked me, or both. We sat in silence for a moment, the candle's burnt wick smoldering in the middle of the cake. Lena said gently, this is really serious. I know. My hands were shaking. I curled them into fists in my lap. I keep thinking I must have missed something. They would never just, I gestured helplessly, not call, on my birthday. Lena hesitated. You said the last time you were there, you fought. We didn't fight, I lied automatically. Then I corrected myself. Okay, we fought a little. About me moving back. About Lena. About everything. I told her about the dinner. About Dad's hand hitting the table. About Mom's tears. Lena listened quietly, her brow furrowing deeper with each sentence. And that was the last time you saw them? She asked. I nodded. We texted a few times after that. Normal stuff. Mom sent a photo of the dog. Dad forwarded some article about resilience, like he always does. Then that message? We'll talk about this later, Em. And later never came, Lena said softly. I swallowed. Apparently not. She reached across the table and took my hand. Okay. First, I'm so sorry this is happening today, of all days. Second, you didn't do anything to deserve being treated like this. Whatever is going on with them, this isn't on you. Her certainty made my eyes sting. But what if it is? I whispered. What if I pushed too hard? What if I was cruel? What if I made them feel abandoned? She squeezed my hand. Did you call them names? Insult them? Tell them you wish they weren't your parents? No, I said. The worst thing I'd said was, I'm not your retirement plan. Did you scream at them? Threaten them? Say you'd never speak to them again? No, I repeated. I was firm. For once, I said no. Then that's not cruelty, she said. That's a boundary. Boundary. The word felt fragile and dangerous at the same time. I'll try Aunt Karen, I said suddenly. My mother's younger sister lived in Ohio and had a Facebook feed full of sunset photos and inspirational quotes. We weren't close, but we exchanged messages on holidays and birthdays. I hadn't told her about the fight. I wasn't even sure my parents had. I found her contact and hit call. She answered on the third ring. Emma, happy birthday, sweetheart. Relief flooded me so fast, I nearly choked on it. Hi, Aunt Karen, thank you. How's the big 3-2 treating you? Doing something fun tonight? She asked. Yeah, I said automatically, eyes on Lena. Cake, probably a movie. Hey, have you heard from my parents today? There was a brief pause. Not long enough to be obvious, but long enough that I noticed. Well, your mom texted this morning, she said cautiously. Why? My heart thudded against my ribs. Can you do me a favor? I asked. Can you not say anything for a second and just answer this? Do they still have the same phone numbers? Another pause. Longer this time. Emma, she said slowly, I don't know if I should be in the middle of... Aunt Karen, I said, my voice cracking. I tried to call them. Both numbers are disconnected. They didn't call me today. They didn't text. Our group chat looks like they deleted their contacts. I just need to know if this is some technical mix-up or if my voice broke, if they did this on purpose. On the other end, I heard her exhale, a faint, weary sound. They changed their numbers a couple of weeks ago, she admitted. Your mom sent the new ones in a family email. Family email, I repeated, numb. I didn't get anything. Karen's silence told me the rest. Did they mention me? I forced out. There was a rustle, like she was moving into another room. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Your mom just said they were making some changes, she said. That they needed some space. That they wouldn't be sharing the new numbers with everyone. Everyone. I swallowed hard. So they're talking to you. They're fine. They're okay. Yes, she said quickly. They're fine. Your dad's knee is bothering him a bit, but he's still golfing. Your mom's in her book club. They're living their life. Without me, I said before I could stop myself. Emma, Karen murmured, please don't make me the bad guy. I told your sister. I don't have a sister, I said, confused. Oh, honey. The pity in her voice made my skin prickle. I'm sorry. That slipped. I have to go. Just take care of yourself, okay? And then she hung up. I stared at the phone, my mind buzzing. I don't have a sister, I said again, aloud this time. Lena's eyebrows shot up. What? But I was already scrolling, pulling up the last email I'd received from my mom. It was 6 months old, a forwarded recipe for the best potato salad ever. Before that, a chain of family updates sent from a group address: Mom, Dad, Aunt Karen, and a few cousins. At the top of the thread, an older message I'd never really paid attention to before. Subject: News from us. From Lisa Harris. To Family List. I opened it with trembling hands. In it, my mother wrote about reconnecting with someone from a very difficult chapter of their lives. She talked about second chances and healing old wounds. She mentioned a name once, in passing. We're so happy to have Sarah back in our lives. I read that sentence 3 times before the meaning landed. Sarah, a name I'd never heard. A person I apparently shared blood with. My parents had cut me off. But they were not alone. They had someone else now. The next time I saw my therapist, Dr. Patel, I handed her my phone with the email open. She read it silently, eyes moving quickly. When she finished, she set the phone down between us. How long have you had this email? She asked. 6 months, I said. I didn't really read it before. I just saw family updates and skimmed the part about Dad's knee and Aunt Judy's new dog. And this is the first time you've noticed the mention of Sarah? Yes, I admitted. I thought they were talking about, I don't know, a cousin or something. Some distant relative. I didn't think there might be another child. I said child, even though whoever Sarah was, she had to be close to my age, maybe older. Dr. Patel folded her hands. How are you feeling right now? I stared at the carpet, like my whole life was built on half a story. She nodded. That's a very understandable way to feel. I let out a bitter laugh. You're not going to tell me I'm overreacting? No, she said gently. I'm going to tell you that being excluded from major information about your own family is a form of betrayal. It makes sense that you're hurt, confused, and angry. Angry didn't even begin to cover it. In the days after my birthday, the emotional landscape inside me had turned into a storm map. Pockets of disbelief here, lightning strikes of rage there. Great, slow-moving fronts of sadness that settled over everything and turned even simple tasks into wading through molasses. I'd gone to work. I'd met with clients. I'd filled out paperwork. But I'd done it all with a part of my brain constantly whispering, they chose her. They replaced you. They didn't even tell you she existed. Do you want to talk about what you've found out so far? Dr. Patel asked. I nodded and told her about the half conversation with Karen, the slip about your sister, the email, the changed numbers. So, putting this together, she said, you have reason to believe your parents have gone no contact with you, while simultaneously reconnecting with another child they had before, or outside of, your awareness. Half-sister, I said numbly. That's the term, right? Or secret sister, surprise sister, limited time offer sister. I stopped, my throat tight. God, I sound awful. You sound hurt, she said. Which you are. I stared at my hands. Is it normal? I asked slowly. To feel jealous of someone you didn't even know existed? Someone who might also be hurt? Like, what if they gave her up for adoption or something? What if she went through hell? And yet I keep thinking, Why does she get them now, when they chose to let go of me? Two things can be true at once, Dr. Patel said. It can be true that Sarah may have her own history of pain and abandonment. And it can be true that your parents, in the way they've handled this, have deeply wounded you. Your jealousy doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. I swallowed. I keep going back over every memory I have, I said. Every time Mom changed the subject when I asked about before I was born. Every time Dad joked that I was their one and only. How many times did they lie right to my face and just expect me never to find out? Secrets like this take a lot of energy to maintain, she said. And when people are confronted with the possibility of having to explain, they often shut down or lash out. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it may help you understand it. I rubbed my temples. Do you think I should try to contact them? I asked. Through Karen or email or, I don't know, a letter. Show up on their doorstep like some desperate movie character. She considered this. What do you hope would happen if you did? I pictured their faces, Mom's tight mouth, Dad's guarded eyes, a stranger Sarah standing behind them in the doorway. I want them to admit they did this, I said. To say, we changed our numbers so we wouldn't have to talk to you. I want them to explain why. I want them to apologize. I want them to say they made a mistake and that they miss me. My voice wobbled. I want them to wish me a happy birthday, even if it's late. She nodded slowly. That's a very clear picture, she said. And if they can't, or won't, give you that what then? I stared at the ceiling. A hairline crack ran across it, not unlike the ones in my parents' hallway back home. Then I don't know who I am to them, I said, or who they are to me. She leaned forward slightly. Even if you never receive the explanation you deserve, she said, you are still allowed to define what their behavior means to you. You can say, my parents chose to go no contact with me, and that choice reflects their limitations, not my worth. Something in my chest twisted, resisting that idea. But it feels personal, I whispered. It feels like a verdict, like they looked at the person I'm becoming, the one who sets boundaries, who moved away, who loves who she loves and decided, we don't want that in our lives. It is personal, she agreed. And at the same time, it is also about their inability to handle a version of you that doesn't fit the role they wrote for you. The good daughter, I said. The obedient daughter, she corrected gently. I let out a shaky breath. I keep thinking about the phrase, I said. My parents went no contact with me first. Like some people say, I went no contact with my parents. It's so backwards. Everyone always assumes it's the kids who pull away, not the parents. Yes, she said. Our culture tends to leave very little space for the idea that parents can abandon adult children emotionally, or that estrangement can be initiated by any side. I feel like if I tell people, I said, they're going to think I'm leaving something out, that I must have done something terrible, that I'm the villain in the story. Her eyes were kind. What if the story is more complicated than villain and victim, she asked. What if the story is about a family system that couldn't adapt to your growth, and about you learning how to live with that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The idea that there might not be a neat resolution, that this might be one of those learning to live with it wounds, was almost too much to hold. As I left her office, the city air felt sharp in my lungs. People hurried past me on the sidewalk, carrying groceries, talking into headphones, living their small, ordinary dramas. I thought about other people's estrangements, the ones I read about online late at night. The comments that said, you only get one mother, or family is everything. The way no one ever said, unless they choose not to be. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second, my heart leapt. But it was just a notification from my banking app. I walked home through the thinning light, rehearsing different versions of the story in my head. My parents and I are taking a break. We're not talking right now. We had a disagreement. None of them felt true enough. The truest one was also the hardest to say. My parents went no contact with me. Weeks turned into months. Life, indifferent to my family drama, went on. At work, I helped a young mother find emergency housing after her boyfriend kicked her out. I sat with a teenage boy in a hospital waiting room while doctors evaluated the bruises on his arms. I advocated for a client who'd been unfairly denied benefits. I watched other families fall apart, and sometimes stitch themselves back together in clumsy but determined ways. I talked about cycles of trauma and resilience, about how people repeat what they don't heal. It was both comforting and infuriating to realize that my own family was just another example. At home, Lena and I found a new rhythm. She learned not to say, "Have you heard from them?" unless I brought it up first. I learned that grief could coexist with small joys. Making pancakes on a Sunday, finding a new favorite show, buying a rug that tied the living room together. In the quiet spaces on the train, in the shower, lying awake at 2 a.m., my parents sat in my mind like unanswered questions. One evening in late autumn, when the air had just started to bite, I got a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Emma, this is your father. My hands went cold. I stared at the message, my heart banging against my ribs. It had been almost 8 months since my birthday. 8 months since the disconnected numbers, the silence. I showed the text to Lena, then sat down on the edge of the bed because my knees didn't feel entirely trustworthy. "What do you want to do?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. I thought I knew what I wanted. An apology. Answers. But now that he's actually texted, I hovered over the keyboard for almost 5 minutes before typing a reply. Me. Hi. How did you get my number? A minute later. We still had it, Em. We didn't delete you. We just needed time. The words made my stomach churn. You changed your numbers without telling me. You didn't call or write, not even on my birthday. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, like he was starting and restarting his reply. "Dad, we thought it would be better this way. Things were getting heated. Your mother was very upset." I stared at that line until the letters blurred. "You thought it would be better not to tell your only child how to contact you?" A longer pause this time. "Dad, you're not our only child." There it was, typed out plainly, like a weather report. I felt something inside me crack in a way that was both painful and clarifying. Me. I saw the email. "Who is Sarah?" "Dad, we don't want to drag you into old mistakes. It's complicated." "You've already dragged me in, by lying, my whole life." Silence. Did I do something? The 3 dots came back. "Dad, you've changed. Since you started that therapy, you talk to us like we're clients you're evaluating. You make us feel like bad parents." I laughed out loud at that, a short, sharp sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Lena sat down next to me, her shoulder warm against mine. "I never said you were bad parents. I said I wasn't going to move back home to take care of you. I said I was building a life that works for me. If that makes you feel like bad parents, maybe you should ask why." No response. A minute. 5. 10. My phone stayed stubbornly silent. "He might be talking to your mom," Lena suggested softly. "They might be, I don't know, figuring out what to say." I set the phone down on the nightstand, face down. "Or he might be doing what he's always done when confronted with something uncomfortable," I said, shutting down. An hour later, still no reply. By morning, nothing. A day passed. 2. A week. I checked the conversation more times than I wanted to admit. Watching the last message, "Maybe you should ask why," become less a question and more a line in the sand. Dr. Patel listened to the story in our next session. "How do you feel about how you handled the conversation?" she asked. "I feel like I pushed him too hard," I said immediately. Then I frowned. And also, like I didn't say nearly enough. Is that even possible? She smiled faintly. It can be, she said. It sounds like you expressed your feelings clearly, which is new for you with your parents. Clarity can feel like aggression to people who are used to you accommodating them. I keep thinking I should have just been grateful, I said. Some people don't have parents at all. Mine are alive. They took care of me. They paid for braces and summer camps and part of my tuition. And now I'm the one saying, "You hurt me." Gratitude and accountability are not mutually exclusive, she said. You can be grateful for what they gave you and still hold them accountable for the harm they've done. I sighed. He said I changed. I murmured. You have, she said. That's the point of therapy. The question is whether the people in your life can adapt to that change, or whether they cling to an outdated version of you because it benefits them. And my parents chose door number 2, I said. Her eyes were kind. Perhaps, she said, your parents are limited in ways that make it very hard for them to tolerate your autonomy. That limitation is sad, but it is not your responsibility to fix it. On my way home, I stopped in front of a stationery store. On impulse, I went inside and bought a set of heavy cream-colored note cards and matching envelopes. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table, the apartment lit only by the warm overhead lamp, and wrote my parents a letter. I didn't write to the new number my dad had used. I didn't email. I wrote the old-fashioned way, because something about ink on paper felt more real, harder to ignore, harder to delete. Dear Mom and Dad, I began, then paused. I started again. Mom, Dad. I wrote about the birthday silence, about the disconnected numbers, about how it felt to discover, in a half-read email, that I was not their only child. I wrote about therapy, about boundaries, about how for the first time in my life, I was learning that love did not have to mean self-erasure. I wrote that I loved them. I did. Love, I was learning, didn't just vanish because trust had been broken. It changed shape. It ached in new ways, but it remained stubborn and complicated. I wrote that their choice to go no contact with me, because that's what it was, a choice felt like abandonment. I wrote that I deserved better. And then, at the very end, I wrote something I hadn't planned. If you ever decide you're ready to talk to the version of me that exists now, I wrote, not the daughter who never said no, you know how to reach me. The door is not wide open, but it's not locked from my side. I signed my name, sealed the envelope, addressed it to the house with the maple tree that might still be standing, still growing, even if I wasn't there to see it. At the postbox, I stood for a long moment holding the letter, the cold metal of the slot under my fingers. You don't have to send it, Lena said softly beside me. You could burn it, keep it, throw it away. I thought about all the unsent messages in my life, the things I'd swallowed instead of saying, the feelings I'd folded up like old receipts and stuffed into the back of my emotional junk drawer. I slid the envelope into the box. As it disappeared, I felt something unclench inside my chest. Not closure, not forgiveness. Just a small, quiet shift. My parents did not reply to the letter. Not in a week, not in a month, not after the leaves fell from the trees and the first snow dusted the city streets. Sometimes, I pictured my mother standing at the kitchen counter, sorting the mail. I saw her hands pause on the envelope with my handwriting. I imagined the different ways she might react. Tears, anger, indifference. I saw my father reading it across the table, jaw tightening, eyes scanning for any line he could twist into an accusation against me. Maybe they read it together. Maybe they never opened it. I would never know. The unknown used to gnaw at me, an endless, maddening itch. Now, slowly, it settled into something else. A scar, not a wound. Still tender when pressed, but no longer bleeding. In the spring, I got a promotion at work. Lena brought flowers to the office. My coworkers took me out for drinks. When my manager raised a glass and said, "To Emma, who always shows up for people," I felt a sudden rush of emotion so strong I had to grip the edge of the table. Later that night, in our apartment, Lena asked, "Did you tell them?" I knew who she meant. "No," I said, "I didn't." "Do you want to?" I thought about it. I imagined sending a brief, factual text to the unknown number Dad had used once. "I got promoted today. Thought you might want to know." I imagined staring at the phone afterward, waiting for a response, opening myself up to another wave of silence. "I don't think so," I said. "Not this time." I saw the flicker of worry in her eyes, the fear that my refusal to reach out meant I was hardening, turning to stone. "I'm not giving up," I added. "I'm just stopping the part where I keep offering them new ways to hurt me." She nodded slowly. "That sounds like a boundary," she said. Boundaries, I'd learned, weren't walls to keep love out. They were filters to keep harm from coming in unchecked. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I created a folder on my laptop titled Family. In it, I put a photo of 5-year-old me, clutching a stuffed bear, sitting on my dad's shoulders, a picture of Mom and me baking cookies, flour on our noses, a screenshot of the last text Dad had sent before everything changed. "We'll talk about this later, Em." I added the email about Sarah, the one line, "We're so happy to have Sarah back in our lives." I stared at the words for a long time. Then, hesitating only a little, I opened a new document and typed, "My parents went no contact with me first." Underneath, I began to write. Not a letter this time, not a plea, a story. I wrote about the little girl who believed her parents' love was unshakable, about the teenager who first sensed the cracks, about the young woman who moved away, got a job helping other families, and slowly realized she had never really looked at her own with clear eyes. I wrote about the night the phone stopped ringing. I wrote about the therapy sessions where I learned that my feelings were not overreactions, but information. That my parents' choice to cut me off said more about their limitations than about my worth. I wrote about the maple tree in front of the house, how it had grown year after year, regardless of whether anyone stood in the yard to measure it, how sometimes growth happens quietly, out of sight. As I typed, I realized this story wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who had ever sat staring at a silent phone, wondering if they were the punchline of a joke the rest of their family was in on. People, I was learning, carried their own estrangements like secret scars, in whispers at parties, in late-night DMs, in anonymous online posts. My parents don't speak to me either. My son hasn't called in 10 years. My sister blocked me after our mother died. We were all walking around with invisible missing pieces. Weeks later, after revising the story until the sentences felt like they belonged to me, I read it aloud to Dr. Patel. When I finished, she asked, "How did it feel to say those words out loud?" "Like I was stepping into sunlight after being in a dark room for a long time," I said slowly. "It's still bright, it still hurts my eyes a little, but I can see more." She smiled. "Sometimes," she said, "the stories we tell about ourselves are cages. Sometimes they're keys. This sounds like a key." On the walk home, I thought about keys and cages, about the roles my parents had written for me. The good daughter, the responsible one, the one who comes home. If they had gone no contact with that version of me, maybe it was because that version no longer existed. Maybe, I thought, as I watched a child run laughing through a spray of water from a burst hydrant, they didn't know where to put the new version, the one who said no, the one who stayed gone, the one who loved a woman and loved her work and loved herself, increasingly, on purpose. That night, lying in bed, Lena tracing lazy circles on my back, I let myself imagine a future moment. Maybe I'm 40, maybe I'm 50, Maybe I'm walking down a street in a different city, or waiting in line at a coffee shop, or leaving a theater. Maybe I look up and see my mother's face across the crowd, older and softer, or my father's shoulders, stooped but still familiar. Maybe our eyes meet. Maybe we talk. Maybe we don't. In that imagined moment, I am not defined by whether they reach for me or turn away. I am not a little girl waiting for their approval like a stamp on my forehead. I am a whole person they chose not to know. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling, at the plain white surface with no cracks yet. "Do you ever think you'll forgive them?" Lena asked quietly in the dark, as if she'd been following my thoughts. I considered the question. "I think," I said slowly, "that I'll forgive myself first. For all the years I tried to earn their love by disappearing. For all the times I assumed everything was my fault. For every birthday I spent refreshing my phone instead of being fully where I was." She nodded against my shoulder. "That sounds like a good place to start." My phone lay on the nightstand beside us, screen dark. Somewhere, in another state, my parents' phones might also have been dark, or lit up with messages from friends, from Sarah, from the life they had chosen to build that did not include me. For the first time, the thought didn't feel like a knife. It felt like a fact, one of many in a world full of them. "My parents went no contact with me first," I whispered into the dark. The words no longer felt like an accusation. They felt like the beginning of a sentence whose ending I would write myself. "And," I added quietly, "and I kept going. And I built a life. And I learned what love could look like when it wasn't something I had to beg for." Outside, a siren wailed, then faded. Somewhere, a car door slammed. A dog barked twice and fell silent. Beside me, Lena's breathing evened out as she drifted toward sleep. I stared into the darkness and felt, beneath everything else, beneath the grief and the anger and the leftover longing, a small, steady thing I hadn't recognized at first. It was not hope for reconciliation. It was not the fantasy that one day they would call and say all the right words. It was the quiet, grounded belief that I would be okay, even if they never did. My parents had gone no contact with me first. The rest of my life, I realized, did not have to be a reaction to that choice. It could be mine.